Matthew Stafford is officially staying with the Los Angeles Rams. What does that mean for him and their Super Bowl odds going into next season? And now, is Aaron Rodgers the next hot QB commodity on the market? Will he be a Giant, a Raider, a Titan, somewhere else? Let's hop into today's video and talk about it. If you do love the NFL, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We are 16 away from 200. Drop a like on the video. Let's hop in to today's video. All right, so kind of as I predicted in the video from a couple days ago, Matthew Stafford is going to remain a Los Angeles Ram. This made the most sense of all to me. We kind of sniffed this out in the video prior, and I'm not saying that I'm some Sherlock Holmes for it. I thought that it was the pretty obvious choice. Use the Raiders and the Giants, teams that just reek of desperation at this point in time, and say, hey, how much money would you guys be willing to give me? Take that number back to the Rams and be like, see, this is my market value. And that's basically what happened for Stafford and for the Rams. Ending this partnership, this duo-ship, him as their quarterback, just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Ultimately, for Stafford, your opportunities are being a winning culture. Sean McVay is your, head coach. You have a top 8 wide receiver in Puka Nacua. You have a defense that's growing and emerging. You contested the eventual Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles better than any team did in the playoffs this past year. The Rams are a spot where, one, you've already won, but two, they're showing you that they can continue to put winning pieces around you. And then from a living lifestyle, families already in California, LA versus in New York, I guess that's a opinion thing. But if you're an older guy like Stafford, older for football, maybe you prefer the beaches rather than the subway. The Raiders are not a bad spot to live. But again, what pieces did they have? Both of those teams, especially more so the Raiders, we're not going to be prepared to be winning here. And even on the Giants, do you think that Stafford just alone on the Giants puts them in a spot where they feel comfortable to be able to compete with Washington and Philadelphia? Washington, who has a ton of money to spend. Philly, obviously reigning Super Bowl champions. It's a tougher spot to be in. Made no sense for Stafford from a team perspective to want to leave the Rams. And for the Rams, again, you're a team who just competed with Philly better than anybody did on their Super Bowl run. Your NFC West is a division that feels like you could compete and be the big dog in for a couple years here. Seattle, are they really going to reach Super Bowl level windows with Geno Smith at quarterback? I don't believe so. The Cardinals, the same question with Kyler Murray, a very young defense. They have some things to work out. Your young defense looked more promising. San Francisco, of course, an excellent front office there, excellently run franchise, but a lot of their better players are getting older and perhaps aging out of their prime. And for the next 2 years, it's possible the Niners are kind of in a retool spot. Is Christian McCaffrey ever going to get back to the level player he was? Is Trent Williams going to hang it up? George Kittle getting a little older. They're likely to trade Deebo Samuel. There's just a lot of question marks there, whereas if you're the Rams, Stafford still playing at a high level, Puka entering his prime, Cooper Kupp, a guy that you're able to move off of, but you've shown an ability in a guy like Puka to, one, be able to draft and develop talent at wide receiver, but two, I think you could bring in a serviceable wide receiver too, or a better tight end, or just a second, more consistent option. As much as I think Cooper Kupp is talented when he's on the field, he wasn't exactly a consistent option for this Rams team. You still have Kyron Williams, a really, really strong defensive line that's young and growing. Jared Verse just won Defensive Rookie of the Year, a guy who in 2 years I think could be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. A secondary that's, with Kitchens and Curl, some young talent there. It's a bright future in LA. And when you're the Rams and you see that, let's go for it. Let's go for it with Matthew Stafford. Obviously, they'd prefer to be working in 1-year contract windows. That way they're not on the hook for a Matthew Stafford fall off if that were to come. But at the end of the day, it's just not how the business works, right? At the end of the day, it's a give and pull. It's a negotiation. This was all open media negotiations. I'm sure the Rams didn't like that. Hell, I'm sure Stafford wasn't a massive fan of having his contract negotiations being dissected in the media by, all the way from ESPN, Rossini, etc., down to channels like me talking about it, I'm sure they weren't a fan of that. But at the end of the day, business is business, and that had to get done. And it was a no-brainer move for the Rams. No-brainer. The game that Stafford had in Philly in that snow against what we saw was a defense that could really fluster, high-end offensive players. And just to continuously make throws, a couple of those throws when he was down 2 scores, or when they were down 1 score and the throw to Puka down the sideline, just the high-level execution that Stafford still possesses at this point in time. I'd be shocked if we saw just a complete collapse and fall off next year. I think this move certainly keeps the Rams window open for next year. And when you look around the NFC, you look at the quarterbacks, and this was the big thing for me. If Stafford were to go to the Raiders, I don't think that I'm sold on them making the playoffs. But Stafford on the Rams, you could argue, is a number 1 to number 3 quarterback in the conference. Whereas if he went to the AFC, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Joe Burrow, I think everybody consensusly agrees those 4 are better than him. So at best, he's 5th. You might have Herbert, you might have Stroud above him. All of a sudden, he's the 7th, 8th best quarterback with probably the 10th best roster in the conference. Whereas on the Rams, he's a top 3 quarterback in the conference with a top 5-ish roster. I think it was a no-brainer move for both sides, and the Rams very much so retained keeping their Super Bowl window open and have to be viewed as a threat going into next year. So that brings us to, what the hell do the rest of these teams do at quarterback? The New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, the Las Vegas Raiders. There's questions. The Minnesota Vikings, what are they currently doing? And a lot of the focus that was on Stafford as this high-end commodity has seemingly shifted to Aaron Rodgers, a veteran quarterback who you could bring in on a 1-year deal, whether it's as a bridge quarterback or could potentially level your team up to a playoff contender. And in the case of maybe a team like Minnesota, Super Bowl contender. Can we bring in this guy? Can we get Aaron Rodgers? And if we do get him, what does he have left? And what is it like in the locker room after we do get Aaron Rodgers? Reports already quickly came out that the New York Giants have shifted their focus to Aaron Rodgers. The fit makes sense, right? He already lives in New York. He already plays at that field. The roster, it's okay. A strong defensive line with, guys like Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence on that line. An offensive line that isn't great, but with Andrew Thomas coming back, there'll be sure some improvements made. You could draft offensive line if you bring in Rodgers. Malik Neighbors, who I think is already a top 10 wide receiver in all of football. Tyrone Tracy, a solid receiving back. You got guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, some nice little pieces, Darius Slayton. And, you have to think about this sometimes in terms of not just where is the team on paper, but where is the team mentally. Dayball and Shane are fighting for their jobs. At a certain point, they have to put out wins. And maybe they could draft a Shador and buy themselves 2 years. But we've also seen teams that are willing to pull the trigger on a quarterback GM combo after a rookie quarterback's first season. We saw Matt Eberflus get fired in the middle of Caleb Williams' rookie season. It happened. So Aaron Rodgers would potentially bring some sense of stability at the quarterback position in New York. He'd be the best quarterback that the Giants have had in a while, but you could make that case for Darnold, Kirk Cousins, potentially. So I don't know if I'm fully sold on that yet. It does kind of signify to me, though, that the Giants are looking to be more win now going into next year. And I would garner to guess that they're going to take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, whichever one of those players falls to 3 in the draft. The Raiders, they're interested in Rodgers. Again, I think the Raiders going after one of these veteran quarterbacks makes a lot of sense. They have the 6th pick in the draft. There's a lot of turnover needed on that roster. The AFC West is not really fully at a point where they could look to compete at this point in time. The Chiefs have won 2 of the 3 last Super Bowls. Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert aren't going away. Sean Payton and Bo Nix aren't going away. So to be able to compete with those teams, if you're the Raiders, you probably need to stack the foundation, stack the roster up, and then have the quarterback be the last piece that you bring in, a la kind of what Minnesota did, where it was like, holy crap, that NFC North with the Packers and Bears and Lions. That's how we were talking about it going into the preseason. And then the Vikings had a fully stacked out roster and brought in just a competent QB and rattled off a lot of wins. So you could win a lot of games that way. For them, Darnold as a bridge guy makes a lot of sense to me. But again, it seems as if based on the contract and the pay that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the next domino to fall, I could really see Rodgers fitting in anywhere, because any team could use a 1-year bridge quarterback that's going to be a Hall of Fame guy. And if Rodgers wants to end his career on a more positive note, probably willing to take a little less money. Do you have him take a lot less money? That way the team could also bring in a Devontae Adams. Maybe, if he goes to the Giants, so they bring in him and Devontae Adams, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, maybe that's a wild card team if things work out properly. If you went to Minnesota and somehow brought in Devontae Adams, you're like, holy crap, is that the Super Bowl favorite out of the NFC? So I think the Rodgers domino will fall. Then the Sam Darnold domino will fall, because the teams will have to pay up at that point. Darnold, you got to go Darnold over Cousins. So that's kind of where the NFL QB market is shaping up at this point. I wanted to come up here and talk to you guys a little bit about it. Quick little 10 to 15 minute video talking about QBs. Drop your predictions in the comment section down below. I think we might react to or do a mock draft coming up next week, and just kind of post combine, see where things are shaking out. Maybe a little free agency predictions, certainly free agency reactions. February is a post Super Bowl. Those 3 weeks are pretty slow for NFL. So we've been rolling out the tier list. We're going to continue to do that. The tight end tier list will as well be dropping next week. So I appreciate you guys' support. If you are new to the channel and you haven't yet subscribed, hit that button, hit the like button. Catch you next time. Peace.